Yes, yes, yes. This is another episode of Wake Up African People. And this is the Truth Doctor and Astro Black, blacker than ever, bringing you truth as we see it. And tonight's show is the neo-colonization of the black mind. Okay, what is neo? Neo is a Greek word that means new. And what is colonization? Colonization means to occupy. So neo-colonization means the new occupying your mind, colonizing your mind, a new way that they colonize your mind. So tonight we're going to talk about how they do this. Now we have a lot of what you call extreme Negropeans, regular Negropeans. We used to call them coons and house Negroes. But today's term is Negropeans because they're black people with a white mind. They think white to a certain extent, because if they really thought all the way white, they'd be fighting for what whites fought for, their own place, their own country, their own harbingers of their own destiny. So tonight, Astro Black and me going to be breaking this down. Back in the day, we had athletes like Jim Brown, Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, and a whole many more that stood up and came together. Matter of fact, they had a conference to support Muhammad Ali. And anybody that know the history of Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown, they've been vocal advocates of the black community mostly all their lives. You know, Jim Brown has never changed. Muhammad Ali is older now, and he's sick now, and we want to send blessings after him, and hopefully that he'll get well again. Because if you know about Muhammad Ali, he stood up for us. He used his stardom to speak out for his people and out for the Nation of Islam and the justice for black people, and spoke out against the injustices that was done to black people. And if you have never seen it, go on YouTube and pull up Muhammad Ali, activist, or pull it up on Google's, and you'll see. You already know Jim Brown, how he is. So today's athletes, they can't even walk in the shoes of these guys when it comes to social consciousness, because they're sold out on getting that money by any means necessary. A lot of them don't even date black women, especially the ones that get real popular. Usually they have a black woman, the black woman will almost look white, you know, because they really want to go to the other side. Because if you got a guy who has a fetish on a sister only because she's light skinned, he has some type of crazy thing going on. But nowadays they can go all the way over to the spectrum. And matter of fact, they push these white girls on them to take their money. Look at Tiger Woods. Look at O.J. Simpson. And many, many more. They married these ladies, and now they're broke and alone. And hopefully their sister will never touch them again. So, Astro Black, we're going to let you break this science down. The mic is yours, my brother.
Right on. Good evening, brothers and sisters. Happy to be with you. Stay black and stay proud. Stay strong. I want to just start out tonight by just saying straight, pulling from Neely Fuller Jr., who wrote the United Independent Compensatory Code and System as a workbook for action and speech for victims of racism, white supremacy. He said back in 1971, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and how it works, everything else you understand will only confuse you. So what we're dealing with in the United States of America is the refined practice of slavery, refined practice of white supremacy, war, public relations war, and the brainwashing protocol for your mind, body, and spirit. Modern cutting-edge practices are used to confuse and stifle your struggle for liberation and freedom, equality, and human rights all over the Western Hemisphere and all over the globe, especially in terms of what black men and women have to deal with on a daily basis for their survival in all forms of human activity, but not limited to economics, education, entertainment, sex, law, politics, religion, and war. And when you talk about the neo-colonial onslaught against people of African descent, the fairest and the easiest visual to draw upon is the colonization of the continent of Africa and the recolonization, and that the way that the resources and the people and the land are being gouged for all their worth by global capitalism, and in other words, global imperial white supremacist capitalism. But these are all symptoms of the same evils, of the same system of oppression that we've been dealing with. Malcolm X back in '62 talked about how the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods in doing so. And he gave the example and saying instead of using chains, they use tricks in order to stifle, curtail, and destroy the liberation and freedom struggle of our people. One such trick is the example of the token integration. In that it won't solve the problem of the masses of black people in this country whatsoever, but it serves a purpose of satisfying the hand-picked Negroes, and I stress the point, hand-picked Negro leaders who are not interested in representing and are incapable of representing the masses of black people, but instead are the pet servants and step stool of the white supremacists who would prefer to have a black face speak on his issues in order to confuse and distract from the primary focus of racism, white supremacy. A perfect example of that is the election of Barack Obama. A part of a symbol of token integration at its highest political, economic, and social levels, where we see a black man in the White House. That house, however, is incapable and of representing and or even solving or changing any of the issues that are affecting the masses of black people in this country, let alone across the globe. We have not seen any change in the white supremacist protocol in the way that the American foreign policy and domestic policy uses to enforce oppression and subjugation, integration, and sexism upon our people. And the whole notion that one person, one politician, one man, one woman is capable of changing or redirecting the course of the ship from as they are embedded within the government is irrational and unlikely and ridiculous on the outset, but the election of Barack Obama is used as a piece of token integration to create the illusion of a colorblind society, knowing that and we all know all the sisters and brothers out there in the world and in the country know this to be a complete fabrication. And but this is all part of the brainwashing and propaganda scheme used to manipulate public opinion. this is all part of a public relations war in the battle for your hearts and minds that's being ciphered down from in a top down process in order to really to destroy the freedom and human rights struggle that black people and other people of color particularly have fought for ever since it came into contact with white supremacy, especially in this 20th and 21st century neo-colonial political atmosphere. And a lot of brothers and sisters around the country have really keyed into one prime example of the sellout factor, especially in the aftermath of a lot of the shootings and police brutality and the denial of the human rights and the civil rights of our people, in incidents like Ferguson and the Mike Brown shooting and the Eric Garner case, where who was murdered and lynched by New York police officers. Recently, a whole squadron of sellouts has come out, being promoted and handpicked by mainstream media in order to justify racial brutality and racist oppression. And one such key example of those has been Charles Barkley, and he's caught a lot of attention around the country for some of his incendiary statements and the way that he committed wholesale race betrayal in an extended CNN interview a few weeks ago. But let's realize, brothers and sisters, that this is a primitive and quite frankly predictable tactic used by the white supremacist power structure and the narrative. You know, they use their sellouts, their Uncle Toms, their race baiters, and just because you have dark skin doesn't mean that you're not a white supremacist. And that's exactly who Charles Barkley represents. Taking a look at his interview, I mean, let's really break down some of the things that he's guilty of in the way that he committed race betrayal and actually trying to curtail and stifle the freedom struggle in the aftermath of the Ferguson case, in the way that a young brother, Mike Brown, was lynched in the 21st century under a black president, and then somehow, despite the fact that there's no question of guilt, he was let off with impunity by this legal injustice system, and that promotes the white supremacist power structure. I mean, let's take a look at Charles Barkley and realizing that he is a prime example of an athlete, a retired over the hill athlete who never once claimed or has the qualifications representing the masses of black people in this country or anywhere else in the world. Charles Barkley was born in Alabama in 1963 in a small community that is known as Leeds, Alabama. Leeds, Alabama, even now is represented by a close to 75% white majority in its census as recorded in its census. So Charles Barkley is not a representative of the black community, whether it's in the ghetto or in the inner city. Also, Charles Barkley had been educated all through the public school system and actually went to Auburn University in Alabama. So he's a product of the Deep South and the holdover of the Governor Wallace legacy, in the way that Alabama is representative of a police of a heavily policed white supremacist state. He's also married to a white woman, and so whether it's in his professional life, whether it's in his social life or romantic life, his home life, or his background as far as his education, he's been thoroughly indoctrinated and integrated into the white supremacy structure, and he is thoroughly rewarded by that power structure. So it should come to no surprise to the hip brothers and sisters out there for why he was handpicked by corporate media to represent, quote unquote, represent the black community and derail the validity and the justification for our struggle for liberation. And all throughout the interview, Charles Barkley went on about how, and I quote, "We only speak about race when something goes wrong," he says, and that black is not always right and white is not always wrong. In his own way, trying to always harping on this illusion of a colorblind society, and a stress on the vapid, rugged individualism that is capitalism. Completely denying the fact that just like every other culture, whether you're looking at the Chinese, whether you're looking at the Jewish, the quote-unquote Jews, which are the white Zionists, where you're looking at Latinos, we represent a culture, a global multi-ethnic culture, but a culture nonetheless. And we are judged, especially in a white supremacy structure, based on our skin color, our religion, our appearance, our nationality, our language, on the virtue of being black, and that we have a collective a narrative. We have a collective heritage in the way that we express our political and social and economic views, values, issues, and problems. And this is something, again, that they handpick Charles Barkley, who again has no qualification to represent any of us, to speak on these issues in an uninterrupted, exclusive, extended interview on corporate media. Charles Barkley also harps on what, again, speaking for the white supremacists, he harps on the white victimhood, where he says, at what point during the interview, he said, "Let's go back to the civil rights movement. How many white folks died?" he asked, and he made a mention of the two white boys who died during the Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964 in Mississippi, and then also went on to exaggerate claims, saying that even in Ferguson, I saw just as many whites as I did blacks marching in the streets. And this is also another common tactic in the use of deception and deceit by white supremacists. Talked about how he actually, in doing so, he's exaggerating and misappropriating the freedom struggle and the political and social efforts of black people, past, present, and future. And he's doing it in actual real time now. Instead of saying, he's reaching back and calling out the Mississippi Freedom Summer and claiming that whites were responsible for doing that. And even now, as people are being brutalized by police, as the infringement of our civil liberties is not going reported, as the police terror and tear gas and mass arrests are being underreported, and in smaller incidents where police deny any violation of human rights and proper police protocol, Charles Barkley, who has never been to Ferguson, has never spoke with any of the organizers in Ferguson, and has never and has never marched one step in the efforts to ensure the rights of black people in Ferguson. He's claiming that there's just as many white people in Ferguson marching in the streets for justice as there are black people, when it's a complete fabrication. I mean, and then also going back to the Mississippi Freedom Summer, this is the tactic of using deceit, misinformation, and the complete fabrication of facts is, again, part of the white supremacist mantra that Charles Barkley is firmly carrying. And the truth of the matter is, in the 10-week project period that the Mississippi Freedom Summer took place in 1964, there are 80 Freedom Summer workers who were beaten, 37 churches who were bombed and burned, 30 black homes and businesses that were bombed and burned, 4 civil rights workers were killed, 2 of them being the white boys, and 4 people were actually critically wounded, and at least 3 Mississippians were murdered because of the support of the civil rights movement. So to exaggerate and to exploit the narrative of the few and far between white workers and using that have felt the brunt of the incidental brunt of racial oppression and brutality and terrorism that black people, past, present, and future, have to suffer each and every day, and using that to overshadow the work and the progress of black sisters and brothers who have been there and have been doing the work all along is it does a disservice to the movement, and is actually actually, quite frankly, an insult to the intelligence and to the integrity and to the legacy of our people. And then also he had a lot to say about the murder of black people at the hands of the cops. He says, and I quote, "The notion that white cops are out there just killing black people is just flat out ridiculous. And I challenge any person, any black person, to try and make that point." And that's coming from a place of ignorance, severe, dangerous, and primitive ignorance on Charles Barkley's part, because black people have always, since the inception of police forces and quite frankly private militia in the United States, have dealt with systematic racist brutality and terrorism at the hands of the police. One thing that I'm sure Charles Barkley is not at all aware of is that the police forces in America originated as what we called patrollers, or otherwise known as slave patrols, were organized groups of 3 to 6 white men who enforced discipline among black slaves in the antebellum U.S. southern states. They policed slaves on plantations and hunted down fugitive slaves. The patrols, again, as we called then patrollers, patty rollers, or patty rollers, used summary punishment against escapees, maiming or killing them. Slave patrols were first established in South Carolina in 1704. 1704, for those who are aware of dates, precedes the foundation of the United States government and the American Revolution. And the idea spread throughout the southern states. So even as a colony, Carolina, which became South Carolina, was one of the first regions to institute slave patrols, which later became police forces, and they spread all across the South, and then were integrated to the North. But they started out as private militia, which were used to terrorize and police the black community in the North American continent. So this has always been their role. This has always been the function of police forces all across America, is to is to enforce and terrorize and destroy the black community whenever it saw fit. These are things that are completely overlooked in very deliberate ways, being used to misdirect from the key issues about what's happening across the United States and across the globe, in the way that the wholesale violence and genocide and deceit on the mainstream public relations that was used to justify the murder of our people. Brother Akbar.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's rough out here, man. My people's minds, intentionally or unintentionally, are very corrupted by white supremacy and colonized. You know, the new colonization or neo-colonization of the mind is very powerful because it's done on the common, everyday man with tokenism by using these so-called athletes and singers and entertainers, and not all of them make a lot of money, but the best ones usually make the big money, and they really, you know, are emasculated with riches and the shiny thing and the 3 silver coin story. You know how somebody will just sell you out for 3 silver coins, but they are natural born sellouts because they expose the whites. Whites make them think they're the best thing. They get a white coach petting them and patting them on the butt and all that stuff, and they're really flipped out. Then you got the black entertainers, and we really even talk about them. But the ones back in the day used to be very vocal. I mean, even Harry Belafonte back in his day, he was vocal. Paul Robeson is probably the most vocal entertainer of all time. You know, and then you had people that would just totally stand up and even make movies that talk about things that's happening to us. I mean, you don't have an athlete today that's even thinking that way. You don't even have a entertainer that's thinking that way. You don't have any corporate blacks thinking that way. Now, I'm not talking about corporate blacks because blacks own corporations. Anybody can get a corporation. All you got to do is file for the papers. You don't have to make no money and call it a corporation. But whites got real corporations. Corporations that hire people by the thousands. I mean, the whole America is hired out by them. But we so neo-colonialized in the mind, the white man just got to tell you you equal. And you really believe it. I mean, wholeheartedly, a black man can read off every atrocity done to you from slavery all up to this very day. And you still oblivious of what's still going on right now in the time that you in 2015 and beyond, if we don't stand up. But these entertainers today, stars, all of them entertainers, because the sports guys are entertainers too. We've been entertaining white folks ever since they met us and knew we could dance and sing. They used to make you dance and sing, play the banjo. Matter of fact, you brought the banjo here, but you from Africa. But the banjo was in Africa, string instruments was in Africa, and Europeans didn't even know what the instrument was. But they took stuff from you and build on it, like the piano. That ain't nothing but a guitar with keys. You know what I'm saying? You boom, 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 press the keys, or a harp without keys, whatever you want to call it. But it's a string instrument. And the string instruments come from Africa, the drums come from Africa, the xylophone. I showed ancient xylophone on the internet. You know what I'm saying? The Africans sitting there playing it, long xylophone. Women, too, and men. So all the stuff that these Negroes think that they make, and they're not really making nothing because they all of them go broke at the end. A large amount of them go broke. Some of them can't read, some of them can't write. They just go to college to play sports. And there's some entertainers out here that's so messed up, and I do believe that they sending drugs to them. You know, sick and drug dealing doctors on them to get them addicted and hooked so they can control them. You know, even especially when you make big money. And we're talking about Michael Jackson. It took Michael Jackson to be terrorized and abused by these white folks, and he woke up. But at least he did speak now. That's the last athlete in our day and time, except for Jim Brown. Some of the old ones are still speaking. But I'm talking about modern-day athlete, a modern-day entertainer that spoke out about black people. You don't got Denzel Washington doing it. I mean, he's the number one star. You ain't got Samuel L. Jackson saying much of nothing. I seen a little something he said on the internet, but it wasn't nothing radical. They're not going to say that. They're not going to look out for you because they've been tricked by the illusion of inclusion. And they're like, you know, oh, we got it up there, we make it. And then some of them can't talk because they get fired from their jobs. Now, back in the day, the athletes used to talk. Like I told you, Muhammad Ali, he didn't want to go to no doggone army because he said, why would I fight for a country that calls me niggers and treats me bad and makes me into a non-citizen, a second-class citizen, third-class citizen, whatever, because it's bad. It's still bad today, but it's so bad. We don't understand that we're in a bad thing because it's not overt. You know what I'm saying? It's covert, you know, to a certain extent. And then they criminalize you and kill you like they did all these brothers every year. About 4, 5, 10 big killings, but only one that hit the spotlight. And Negroes will go out and tear up everything and carry signs. And nowadays, white folks done joined you in the party. And like the brother said earlier, stupid-ass Charles Barkley talking about he seen whites out there. Whites are sent out there to desensitize your movement. What's that movement doing right now? What did all that marching and burning down the stores and everything do? Nothing but destroy property. You know what I'm saying? Destroyed the community in the stores that might have gave some of them people a job. You know what I'm saying? I said Mike with a big Mike because most of them people down there is unemployed. And it ain't that many jobs. And that's going all around. Because like I always say in my shows, you know, there's not every show, that the white man has, the Negro, the common Negro, has outlived his usefulness to the white man. Even if you had a degree or whatever, you are not promised a job or nothing anymore. You be back in the day, if you had to go to college and you was exceptional and everything, they would pick you so they can, neo-colonize your mind and use the resources of your mind for the benefit of white supremacy.
Right.
Astro Black, the mic is yours.
Right on, brother. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And
yes.
Success within the white supremacy structure is a hand-picked process. There's a lot of just like how they broke, as you talked about before. You talked about the bug breaking. There's a social engineering process that goes into choosing and selecting the select few black people who are allowed to hoof up the ladder for acceptance and reverence in white supremacist power structure. But the social conditions, the political conditions, the economic conditions of the vast majority of the black masses across the country worsen, or not have worsened ever since our contact with these white devils. It's one of the when we talk about neo-colonialism and the refinement of white supremacy racism, we have to realize that racism is in the study of racism, white supremacy has been broken down into 4 basic stages by those that don't include Charles Barkley, but our black leaders, thinkers, revolutionary sisters and brothers who have studied politics and science, religion, economics, and social matters have come to the analysis that first, white supremacy is established Then it's maintained. Step 2. Step 3 is the expansion of white supremacy. And step 4 is the refinement. The refinement means that the sum total of all speech and or action by those white persons who participate in white supremacy racism in a manner that improves the methods that help make the practice of racism more efficient and or more acceptable to the victims themselves. So, and taking consideration the brainwashing and propaganda machine that's being used in the aftermath of these mainstream cases where black men and women are being lynched by police and private citizens, all being white. There's coupled with the threat of violence and the use of wholesale direct violence, there's a use of the indirect violence of the war of the words and manipulation of the manipulation of public opinion and public relations. That is the language of deceit and the language of the refinement of white supremacy. And when you talk about the refinement, this means that white supremacy and white supremacists strive to decrease the necessity of using direct violence and or threat of violence against non-white people. They instead strive to increase the use of deceit as the basic means of causing the victims to enjoy and to not resist the subjection of white supremacy. And the refinement stage of white supremacy is generally promoted through the systematic use of falsehood and or flattery. Sometimes the flattery takes on the form of material objects distributed among non-white people of the known universe and to be used as a so-called status symbol. So in the case of Charles Barkley and other sellout black white supremacists, in the way that Dave Chappelle very, very clearly illustrated through his comedy, these are black white supremacists. And they are being rewarded for the commitment and their compliance with white supremacy in the public sphere. So I've noticed in any and all cases where there's somebody who's speaking for the liberation and human rights struggle that is happening around the country and around the world, and not just in Ferguson, and not just in St. Louis, not just in Florida, but in New York, in Los Angeles, in Ghana, in Egypt, in the UK, in France, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, in Colombia, in Venezuela, mainstream politician talking heads and other white supremacists who are put in places of public influence have a way of controlling and misdirecting the conversation, and in many cases where they cut them off. Many of the listeners remember the CNN interview where Talib Kweli, outspoken revolutionary rap artist, poet, and community servant, was pulled in for an impromptu interview where he spoke very candidly about the white supremacist narrative and the way that CNN and other mainstream media outlets use to promote this narrative, regardless of their intentions. He was very immediately cut off, and each and every point that he made was argued down or immediately there was an attempt to discredit what he was saying by the then on-screen correspondent Don Lemon, who many of us in the audience of the black audiences has already questioned his motives and his allegiances, being that he's a very complicit and whitewashed representative of the CNN network. But the Uncle Toms are given a wide range to roam and mishandle these issues. In the case with Charles Barkley, who's obviously given media coaching. Anyone who's seen Charles Barkley in other instances where he's able to speak for himself, he has a very inarticulate and buffoonish way of stumbling over issues and even his own words, and clearly lacks a very fundamental access of the human language. But in this case, in the case of the CNN interview, he was used to the on-screen correspondent sort of guided him through the interview and led him on with questions about Eric Gardner and a Trayvon Martin case and whether or not Mike Brown's stepfather should, in fact, be indicted for inciting public disturbances and violence in the aftermath of the verdict of the Mike Brown grand jury assessment of Darren Wilson's involvement in the case. So the Uncle Toms are promoted, and they're given these token integration booby prizes, where they're flattered and given all these kinds of status symbols. Being allowed to have an extended interview on mainstream national television is a status symbol, especially for a brother who had no other purpose in his professional adult life except for shooting basketball shots. So let's be very clear about who this is and what role he plays in the white supremacist power structure. He is used to be the sounding board for the white supremacist who realizes the heavy consequences of being labeled as a racist. So in order to deny in order to deny the validity of the human rights and freedom struggle and to deny the very existence of white supremacy and racial oppression, Charles Barkley is being used as that house Negro to completely dispel and brainwash and propagandize the audiences across the United States and speak for white supremacists as a whole. Brother Akbar. Let him know what's up. Are you still with us, Brother Akbar?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had myself on mute. I was just talking away and everything. Like I said, these athletes are, they sold out for the shiny things. They get so much money and they get addicted. I wouldn't be surprised to that lifestyle. It wouldn't be surprised to me if Charles Barkley, wasn't on the way of being broke, because he's probably living that high life that he was living while he was playing basketball. He had everything, and I don't know of any business that he's in like Magic Johnson or even Michael Jordan and other players like John Sally from back in the day. A lot of them old players, some of them invested their money in businesses and still doing pretty decent, but not like they were when they was playing basketball. But many of the idiots like Charles Barkley, the ones that can be used and abused, to come out and say that if the Ku Klux Klan would pay him, he would work for them. The Negropean is just a complete sellout, and he would do anything for money. That addiction to that lifestyle, it's crazy. Some of them even forget their own family. They don't even want to be around their family, so they won't remember them that they black. And that's crazy. They don't want to be around black people. They get white friends and everything, and they don't even come. Some of them don't even go back to the neighborhoods where they used to live, because they believe that they have been accepted in the great white way, and they want to forget that they was black, living in the ghetto, living in the shack, or living in the living in the down south in damn shack, porous dirt roads in front of your house. It's probably sometimes, I ain't gonna say an outhouse still exists down south. I don't know, but I do believe that they may have some, because there's some real poor white and black folks in Mississippi. So it might be out there, So this cool stuff has to be addressed, and hopefully some of them will. I doubt it. Or maybe they may stumble past one of the episodes that the brothers and sisters be doing, talking about stuff like this, and maybe listen by mistake and get inspired that they doing wrong, injustice to their people. So these guys and the superstars and all, we can't look to them like the ones that we used to look to back in the day. And let me get my glasses on. I done misplaced my glasses here, and I want to read from something. It says, NFLer Jim Brown answered the question for Civil Rights Summit. Jim Brown still kicking and fighting for his race, no matter what. And Jim Brown got to be in his late 70s, but he still looked good. He got out of football in time before he hurt himself, went into the movies, and always kind of stood up for his people. Now, NFL, and then they try to smear, I want to talk about that. They always smear the black people, or they don't give them recognition no more, because they always talk about Jordan, they talk about Russell. They don't even talk about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because he was radical. And that's why they said Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is almost broke. That's what I heard recently. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the highest scoring, best basketball player that ever lived. Michael Jordan and nobody, Kobe Bryant, none of them have got no points like he got. What determines you to be the greatest in basketball is how many points you put in the basket, not jumping up and down, flying through the air, shortening your career. This man's skyhook was unstoppable. Even though I don't want to get deep into basketball, but I did love Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he played the game of basketball. He was a basketball scientist. He redefined the game of basketball. And he also he kept the definition of what a black man's supposed to do. Once they get a stage, once they get a podium to talk, they're supposed to speak out for the upliftment and for the benefit of their race. It's always has been a tradition for athletes to do that. You can go all the way back to see what black people, that became famous, used to use their fame, some of them, not all, for the benefit of their people, like Ozzie Davis, and, it's so many minor more. They did a lot of things, said a lot of things. You might not heard all of them, but back in the day, they did what they're supposed to do. And they say, why are we talking about the athletes and all that? Because they black like us. You're supposed to reach back. White folks reach back and help everybody in America. You may be broke or poor, but you make them get welfare. You make them go to these places. That's how they keep you. They keep you colonized. You know what I'm saying? Neo-colonization of the mind is a serious thing, because if you're smart and intelligent, they harvest your mind power, your mind resources, I call it, and they use it for the benefit of white supremacy. If you're dumb, usually they use you for their military, send all the Negroes up to the front line, let them get killed while the white boys are the commanders behind you. So, and this tokenism thing is dangerous, because the token Negropean gives you hopes that you can reach this pinnacle. It's not that many places in the pinnacle, but they give you hope, and this hope is fueling our people to keep on working for the benefit of white supremacy, instead of working for the benefit of our supremacy, black supremacy. Black people getting up. Now, I'm not talking about to reign supreme, be racist and nothing. I'm just talking about standing on the stage of the world as an independent people that can rule themselves without needing the white man to be their masters in 2015. This shit is getting old, people. This shit is getting old. We're going to have to wake up and do the right thing, or we doomed. Your children's doomed. Your grandchildren's doomed. And you're doomed, because you're going to be forgotten. And everybody talk about, black kids don't respect their elders no more. Why would they respect you? and you send them out in the world not telling them the truth about white supremacy, not telling them the truth that we still are captured by these people mentally and physically, because if your mind is captured, your body shall follow, because your mind controls your body. So we send our children out here and they see this scary world and they scared. They scared, and you don't equip them and tell them about this. You don't tell them to go out and be all you can be and build a business and hire people and do all the same things that whites are doing to get themselves on a higher level of life. You don't tell them that. You tell them, get your good job. And when you get on the job, don't talk too much because you might get fired. So you don't even tell them that white kids talk to them.
Let them know. Let them know
what's
up.
You don't even tell them what white people tell their children. You know what I'm saying? Go out and conquer the world. The world is yours. Like Nino Brown said, the world is mine. Just like Scarface said, the world is mine. You don't tell them to go conquer the world. Go take what's ours, son. Don't let nobody hold you back. You can do anything. We give them lies like Barack Obama's president. You might be able to be president one day too. Yeah, if you want to be used as a token nigger for the benefit of white people. You know what I'm saying? Barack Obama is a token Negropean mulatto. And if you go and read Chancellor Williams' book, Destruction of Black Civilization, he goes, and this ain't no out of his mind book. He does all the research, goes to Africa. He was the first. And I'm surprised UNESCO paid him for a book like this and financed it. Chancellor Williams couldn't have finished his second and third volume of the book because it was too much. But in his book, Destruction of Black Civilization, he says that the biggest downfall of our people is the mulattoes. And you can see that today. Look at a mulatto president that won't even talk about your plight in America. All that president would have had to say is Marcus Garvey was right. Do what Marcus Garvey said do. And that would have been enough to help the minds of the black people, hopefully, to rise up to a better and more efficient and more together people. Because that's what we need to be, together, as one, on one track for the benefit of our people. Okay? So we're going to say good night and peace out, because this has been another episode of Wake Up African People. And if you want to get the lowdown and the truth about what's going on, tune in. We'll be here. Astro Black.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. Stay strong, stay black. Thank you, Brother Akbar, for letting us know what's up.
Yes, sir. And thank you. Good night.